Hello students, I welcome you all to this virtual learning online platform. In this class, you will learn William Blake's A Poison Tree, one of the very famous poems written by this poet. A general introduction to William Blake as a poet and the biblical background to the present poem has already been discussed in the previous couple of lectures. Now I would like to begin with the text of the poem. If you remember, I talked about 7 deadly sins according to the Roman Christian theology. And these 7 deadly sins are pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, sloth, and wrath. In the present poem, we will discuss about the last one, that is wrath. In general terms, you can also call it anger. And you know very well that so many things happen around us, and few of them which we do not like personally, and immediately we start reacting to it. And once we start reacting to the situation that we do not like, automatically our gestures are changed, our body language changes, the aggressiveness in the language itself comes, and we express our anger on the other people, those whom we feel that they are responsible. And this poem, which is titled as A Poison Tree, begins with this particular deadly sin, that is wrath. See how effectively the poet begins with the poem. The rhyming scheme is also very simple. The last word of the poem has well-connected ending with a similar kind of phone with the second line last word, and that is also continued with the third and the fourth. So here you get a very simple rhythm because of this kind of arrangement made by the poet. The speaker of the poem says, I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. See the very simple, lucid language which has been used by William Blake. In a very simple line, he says, once I got angry with my friend, whatever it may be the reason is not quoted by the poet. Maybe something might have happened, something that the speaker did not like about the friend. Maybe his action, his deeds, his attitude, his approach, his response, whatever it may be. And that's why the speaker or the narrator of the poem got angry with his friend. But what happens later, the second line is very apt and suggestive. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. See the kind of feeling that the poet is talking about. The poet is talking about the angry mood of an individual. You know, we get angry with so many issues around. If your friend did not follow you or accepted your proposal, you get angry. If your siblings are troubling you, you get angry. Sometimes you get angry even with your parents, if at all they don't follow you or don't oblige your request. You know, whatever that does not appeal to our mind and psyche, if at all that happens around us, immediately our mood changes and we get angry with the situation, we get angry with the people around. Same thing happened in the context of the poem. But you see, what is the difference between action, reaction, and proaction? See the kind of situation now. The poet says, I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. Once, I got angry with my friend. But whatever anger, whatever wrath that I had in my mind, I did not suppress it. Very politely, very cordially, very much friendly, I expressed my anger, my wrath, the reasons of my wrath and anger to my friend. And as soon as I got relief from that tension, automatically my wrath came to an end. See, this is very important. If you suppress any of your feelings, different feelings are there, you know. You have emotions, feelings, so on and so on. Never suppress it. If you express it, automatically you feel more and more comfortable. Now, in this context, I would like to tell you the difference between action, reaction, and proaction. What I personally feel, that the narrator of the poem is very much proactive. What do you mean by that? See, some action took place, something happened between the two. That is the narrator and his friend. That was the action, right? And because of that action, because of that happening, because of these circumstances, the narrator got angry with his friend. That the feeling of anger for the friend is a reaction. But did he react very strongly? No. Thus, narrator did not react immediately, but moreover, I feel that he proacted. What is that proaction here? See, reaction is always negative. It has a negative connotation. Whereas the proaction indicates the positive connotation. If at all he would have got angry with his friend, scolded him or said something to him, probably there would have been a damage in their friendship. There would have been a breakup. But the narrator did not behave that way. Moreover, he was very, practical, pragmatic, similarly emotional also. Instead of reacting to the situation and getting angry and expressing his vehement to the friend, simply he talked about his wrath. Simply he told about the reason of his anger to his friend, and maybe the friend might have given some clarification, and automatically whatever anger that was there in the mind of the narrator, that came to an end. See the difference between action, reaction, and proaction. I will give another example in this context. Suppose I have headache. What do? I just take a pill, a medicine, a tablet, and I expect that once I consume the tablet, I should get relief from the headache. But as soon as I, consume the tablet, instead of any relief, I found that there are some rashes on my body. Right? Now you might have understood. I consumed the tablet with an expectation that I will get relief from the headache. But instead of getting the relief from the headache, I got rashes on my body. It means I consumed the tablet with an expectation of proaction of the tablet, but instead the tablet worked negatively and it reacted. So you have the action of consuming tablet. Since it did not work positively, so that reacted means reaction. And if at all it would have given me the relief, then I would have called it a proaction. So that is the difference between action, reaction, and proaction. So whenever we live our life, we maintain our relationship with many number of people around. There are our akins, there are our close and distant relatives, there are our neighbors, there are our teachers, there are our friends. So many people are. And we do have our, commitment to maintain that relationship. So here, I find this particular narrator is very proactive in this respect, and that's why he expressed his anger right in front of the same friend who was the reason for his anger. And what happens later? The anger came to an end. Now you see in the next expression, what does the poet say? Something that happened is totally contradictory. I was angry with my foe. I told it not. My wrath did grow. Now there is a shift in the idea. What is that? In the case of the first incident, something happened in the respect of the friend, and the narrator got angry with his friend. Since he was emotionally nearer to the narrator, he expressed his wrath and anger to the friend. As soon as he expressed, he got relief from the tension. He felt comfortable. and the wrath came to an end. But in the next expression, the situation changes. Instead of having a friend around, the narrator gets angry with his enemy. F-O-E, foe means enemy. Actually, we should not have enemy as such. Mind it well. Sometimes we like the people and a few people we dislike. That dislike is because of the change in the temperament, okay, or the non-suitability of our attitudes and views, so on and so on. So we should not really have any foe or any enemy as such. So we should be able to maintain our relationship with the rest of the people around with a very amicable, friendly manner. But even though, just take it for granted now, the narrator has a foe also, has an enemy also, and he got angry with his enemy. But what happened in this context? When his friend was there, he expressed his anger and came to know about the reason, and automatically the wrath came to an end. But the same thing did not happen in the respect of an enemy. Instead of expressing his anger with the enemy, he cultivated it for long. And as long as he cultivated it, automatically the wrath did not come to an end. The anger did not reduce in the course of time. On the contrary, the anger and the wrath increased in the course of time. And that's why the poet says, I was angry with my foe. I told it not. My wrath did grow. So, this poet has very, very effectively communicated certain facts of our life. As I said, the poem has a narrator, and that I stands for the poet himself. The I stands for the poet, the narrator. This first person I clearly indicates to the poet. And the first stanza lets you know about the feeling of anger, the feeling of wrath. Is there anyone in the world who never got angry at all? I think this is highly impossible, right? If at all you also take the cases or the examples of those who are treated to be the abode of peace and non-violence, at least once in their lifetime, they might have got angry with somebody or the other. So when the poet or the narrator got angry with his friend, he simply expressed his anger, the reason of his anger with his friend. Probably the friend, gave the positive response, clarified the matter. And this action of telling, as I said, had a positive effect that I called it a pro-action. If at all he would have negatively responded to the situation, probably there would have been a breakup in their relationship, that of friendship. But the same thing is not going to happen in the respect of an enemy. Because emotionally the enemy is away from you. You don't have that bond that really brings you together. If at all something goes wrong, you do express your feelings and emotions with your close friend, with your bosom friend. But does it really happen in the case of an enemy? Since the enemy is far away from you in the emotional point of view, there is no bond of togetherness, and that's why the narrator did not express his anger to the enemy, and in the course of time, instead the anger should have come to an end, but on the contrary, it increased in the course of time. So if at all, the narrator might have expressed his anger even to the foe, even to the enemy, probably the same pro-action might have taken place. But that is not actually going to happen in this context. Now you see how the poet proceeds with the subsequent idea. The first stanza has 4 lines. Now I'll get into the second stanza that also has 4 lines. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears, and I sunned it with smiles and with soft, deceitful wiles. Now I would like to take you back to the story of Adam and Eve that I narrated you in the previous class. Now you go back to the biblical reference. Adam and Eve are living in the Garden of Eden called paradise. Both are very much committed, cordially living on this surface of the earth, following the orders of the God, never disobeying the God. But once the third one, that is Satan in the form of a fly and later in the form of a serpent, comes into the picture, the Satan makes them aware about the tree of knowledge. Already I told you about that. The God has ordered Adam and Eve, hey Adam and Eve, never go to the another corner of the Garden of Eden. That is the forbidden area for you. If at all you go, never eat the fruits of that forbidden tree. That was the commandment. That was the order given by God. Both of them were very much conscious of. They took utmost precaution and they never even approached towards that particular region. But my question is, if at all God wanted them, that is Adam and Eve, to be innocent forever, so there was no need for the God to plant that tree of knowledge in one of the areas of the Garden of Eden. And if at all he would not have, or the God would not have planted the tree over there, there was no need even to instruct Adam and Eve not to go there. See, what I personally feel, this is what, if at all you believe in the concept of God, right? And if you feel that the entire creation, whatever nature, atmosphere that we find around us is created by God, then God has intentionally planted the tree called the forbidden tree, called the tree of knowledge, and intentionally told Adam and Eve, since they were just like the small tots, small children, and they were instructed not to go toward the area. Now you just think in the perspectives of the human mind, human psychology, especially a child psychology, as we are reported or informed that Adam and Eve are living on the surface of the earth called the paradise, that is the Garden of Eden, and they are purely innocent. Innocent like a small child, that too less than 1 year. So if they are so, what is the common tendency of the children? If you ask them not to do something, I can assure you 101% they will try to do that thing that you are trying to make them away from. Right? So if it is the case and you apply the same psychoanalytical theory in the respect of Adam and Eve, I think whatever they did is nothing wrong at all. Because when you call a child, see, don't go there, never touch a flame, you will get a burn. The child will get attracted towards the brightness of the flame. It will try to catch it once. And once the child gets a burn, next time the child itself will tell, never go there. Otherwise, your hand or your fingers will get burned. So same psychological, approach, same psychological theory can also be applied in the respect of Adam and Eve. So the curiosity is increased in their mind that the God asked us not to go there. But what is something special there? Why the God wanted to hide something over there? So these kinds of things, these kinds of ideas may come to one's mind. But anyway, leave it aside. And I'll just focus on this particular stanza. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears. And I sunned it with smiles and with soft, deceitful wiles. Again, you have the experience of the simplicity of expressions in this stanza also. In the second stanza, the narrator of the poem refers to the title. What is the title of the poem? A poison tree. And here, the metaphor of tree is very, very prominent one. And see here, this poison tree is being nourished by the narrator. And that's why he says, I watered it with my tears. Right? So this poison tree is being nurtured, is being nourished, is being constantly and regularly watered by the feelings of fear and resentment. Now you try to compare in the context of Adam and Eve also. They had the feeling of fear in their mind about the forbidden tree. Adam and Eve had the fear of feeling and resentment about the taste of the forbidden fruit. And out of that fear and resentment, they did not go to that particular area. Because of the feeling of fear and anxiety, they never tasted the fruit of the forbidden tree, called the tree of knowledge. And finally, you see here, the narrator or the poet himself says, I personally watered this poisonous tree or this tree of knowledge with my own tears, with my feelings of fear and resentment. And while these feelings were inside the narrator's mind it well, he covered them with false smiles. He is putting a mask. Sometimes we do so. At the bottom of the heart, we are in sorrow, we are in grief. But we show a smiling face to the world around. What is going on within and what is being shown on the, body, both the things are contradicted. The same thing the poet is also going to tell us. This acted like the sunlight for growth of the poisonous tree. In the third line, the poet says, and I sunned it with smiles. See, that until and unless you properly water a plant, and unless it is properly sunned also, means unless you keep it in the proper sunlight, the tree won't grow. If at all you want to have a complete growth of the tree, definitely you should properly water it then only it will have a complete nourishment, and then you should also sun it as much as possible. Then only the things will move on the right direction. But here the poet says, and I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears, and I sunned it with smiles and with soft, deceitful wiles. What do you mean by that? Deceitful wiles. Deceitful means when somebody is trying to keep something hidden, or somebody's dishonest behavior, something that you want to hide from others. And wiles means tricks, ways of persuading someone into doing something. And here in this context, the narrator is trying to tell you that these feelings of anger were inside the narrator's mind. But even though he nurtured and nourished the plant, even though he properly sunned the plant, and this acted like the sunlight for the growth of the poison tree, and here the poet says, soft, deceitful wiles. It means these are the tricks to hide one's real hatred for others, one's real dislikes and malice for others. And thus, this anger, this wrath, continued to grow time to time and again, and it became more dangerous. And now the narrator, as he says, feels that there is a need for revenge. See the kind of growth in the course of time. In the respect of the friend, he expressed his anger, anger came to an end. In the respect of the enemy, he did not express his anger, he did not open his mind. Constantly, what happened then? The wrath continued to grow, and now the status is he is in the mood of taking revenge upon the enemy. See, this way the poet is trying to tell you whatever feelings and emotions you have, just try to vent it out. Try to express it. And unless you express your emotions, feelings, and so on, you will not be able to live a comfortable life. So these are the two stanzas of this poem that tells you a lot about the deadly sins. So never cultivate anger, never have hatred and malice for others. And if at all you are the victim of all these deadly sins, or even one of these deadly sins, you are finished. You are done. So if at all you want to live a good, comfortable, well-to-do life, then you need to control your feelings and emotions, especially something that goes negatively. And always have a pro-action. Instead of reacting to the situation, try to proact to the situation. So automatically, the situations and circumstances will be under your control. So with this positive note, I put a pause here, and the remaining two stanzas will be discussed in the next class. Thank you very much.